Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be objectively unpacking a pretty fascinating speech by Allama Kadim Hussein Rizvi. We'll be looking closely at exactly how he weaves ancient, sacred history into a highly effective narrative of modern political defiance. Whether you're deeply familiar with the political landscape of Pakistan, or you're just really interested in the nuts and bolts of political rhetoric, this is an incredible look at how historical templates are used to mobilize people right now, today. So let me ask you this. How in the world does a historical battle from centuries ago actually connect to a modern-day arrest at a Karachi airport? I mean, it's a massive leap across time, right? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore. We are going to look at the specific rhetorical strategies the speaker uses to bridge that gap, building this unyielding political narrative that literally frames a modern legal confrontation as a timeless religious trial. All right, let's dive right in. Here's our quick roadmap for the explainer. First, historical parallels of faith. Second, rejecting worldly compromises. Third, divine tests of devotion. Then, the Karachi airport confrontation. And finally, legacy and modern implications. Part 1. Historical parallels of faith. Setting the baseline. To build a narrative of total, ultimate defiance, the speaker first has to define what uncompromising faith actually looks like. And he does this by reaching back to a legendary moment in Islamic history. In his speech, Rizvi vividly recounts the Battle of the Trench. On one side, you have this physically imposing warrior, Amr bin Abdul Wud, who arrogantly challenges the Muslims. And on the other side, Hazrat Ali steps up with a completely principled and fearless response. This stark contrast sets up a crucial baseline for the audience. True bravery means standing your ground, even against overwhelming odds. And this perfectly illustrates the absolute clarity required in the speaker's worldview. Before the duel even begins, Hazrat Ali doesn't just lash out or blindly attack. He gives his opponent 3 highly structured choices. Number 1, accept Islam. Number 2, retreat safely and save your life. Or number 3, prepare to fight. The speaker zeroes in on these steps to show that religious duty isn't about blind rage. It is about absolute, unwavering clarity and a complete lack of fear. Then the anecdote reaches its climax. The speaker describes a duel so intense that a massive dust storm literally swallows both warriors. The tension just builds and builds until finally, the cry of Allah Akbar, God is great, rings out from Hazrat Ali, signaling his victory. The speaker strategically uses this historical moment to anchor his entire premise. The message is clear. When you stand firm in your faith, without a single compromise, divine triumph is the inevitable result. Which brings us to Section 2, Rejecting Worldly Compromises, the warning. Having firmly established what true faith looks like out on the battlefield, the speaker pivots. He shifts focus to the internal battles we all face, specifically that temptation to trade our religious integrity for worldly comfort. To hammer this home, he strategically weaves in this piece of Persian poetry from the renowned poet Sheikh Sadi. By bringing classical literature into a modern political speech, he really elevates his argument, giving it the heavy weight of historical wisdom. So, what does this actually mean for us? Translated, this poetry serves as a pretty stark warning. You should never rejoice, never feel like you've succeeded if you've ruined your faith just for the sake of the material world. The speaker uses this verse to directly call out and condemn anyone who compromises their core religious values for temporary, societal, or political gains. And, as we'll see, this perfectly sets the stage for his own real-world choices later on. Moving on to Section 3, Divine Tests of Devotion, Separating the True Believers. Here, the speaker adds a whole new layer to his rhetoric. He introduces the idea that the truly righteous are almost always a tested minority. To illustrate this, he walks the audience through the Quranic parable of Talut's army. It goes like this. Talut leads his army on a grueling march. They reach a river, absolutely parched, but they're given a strict command. Do not drink more than a single handful of water. This is a divine test. And guess what? The vast majority fail. They drink, they disobey the command, and they're left behind. Rizvi uses this story to argue that having massive numbers means absolutely nothing if you don't have discipline. And he immediately backs this up with another amazing story. Abdullah bin Hudhaifa, a companion of the Prophet, is captured by the Romans. The Roman emperor offers him half of his kingdom and then his entire kingdom just to abandon his faith. His response? He refused to betray the Prophet for even the blink of an eye. The speaker is intentionally layering these historical stories to build this impenetrable wall of precedent for unyielding loyalty. All right, Section 4.
The Karachi Airport Confrontation, Modern Application.
Now we hit the major turning point. This is where the speaker takes all those ancient parables of uncompromising faith we just talked about and snaps them right onto a real-time event in his own life. He describes the escalating tension at the Karachi airport on January 4th. Hours prior, he already anticipates the arrest. By 8 p.m., he's initially denied a seat on his flight. The moment they land, plainclothes police board the plane. Out on the tarmac, police encircle his wheelchair. He isn't just giving us a play-by-play of an arrest. He is deliberately framing this entire sequence as a modern-day trial of faith. And then comes the critical moment of negotiation. A high-ranking police official, the CCPO, gives him an ultimatum. If you do not go towards Kamachok, you will not be arrested. Now, think back to those historical parables for a second. Structurally, this is the exact same worldly compromise that the Romans offered, or the temptation of the river water. It is a direct test to abandon his mission in exchange for personal freedom. His response? Swift and absolute. I am definitely going towards Kamachok. By highlighting this outright rejection of the police offer, the speaker firmly cements his image for the audience. He's telling them, look, I am the direct, unyielding inheritor of that sacred historical legacy I just spent the first half of my speech describing. He was offered the easy way out, and he chose defiance. The climax of this modern story mirrors that literal dust storm from Hazrat Ali's duel. His driver is frantically trying to weave through heavy traffic to evade the authorities, but ultimately the vehicle is surrounded and the speaker is taken into custody. But here is the key detail he includes. His supporters were loudly chanting religious slogans throughout the whole ordeal. With that, he rhetorically transforms a standard police detainment into a massive moment of fervent religious mobilization. And finally, Section 5, Legacy and Modern Implications, the Rhetorical Synthesis. Let's pull all these threads together to see exactly how this political rhetoric works under the hood. The strategy is brilliant and super explicit. Hazrat Ali's uncompromising stance? That becomes the speaker's refusal to back down on the tarmac. Talut's tested minority army? That represents the speaker's devoted followers facing the power of the state. Rejecting Roman wealth maps perfectly onto rejecting the CCPO's offer of freedom. Rizvi is essentially copying and pasting 7th century sacred history directly onto a 21st century confrontation with Pakistani authorities. To wrap up his argument, he leverages all this historical setup to launch a really sharp critique of the state. First, he frames Pakistan as a nation inherently built in the name of Islam. Then he draws a stark contrast. He alleges that the state supports blasphemers while simultaneously arresting him, a disabled, white-bearded religious scholar. He calls this glaring contradiction a moment of reflection, or lamhaya fikriya, for the nation. He's using his personal arrest to question the very moral and religious legitimacy of the state itself. So, that brings us to the end of our explainer, and it leaves us with a pretty massive question to chew on. When sacred history is so effectively utilized to mobilize modern political movements, how does it reshape a nation's future? The rhetoric we've unpacked today shows us that history isn't just something stuck in the past. In the hands of a skilled speaker, it's a highly active, incredibly potent tool for shaping the present. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope this breakdown gave you a clear, structured understanding of how these powerful narratives are built. See you next time.